both onshore and at sea. Mr Speaker, I commend the Maritime Powers Extension Bill to the House. Ngā mihi nui ki koutou katoa.
The question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr Speaker.
I call Simon O'Connor.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Can I acknowledge the Minister who's just taken his chair, obviously in taking over the role, but importantly acknowledging the former Minister too, who had shepherded this to the House so far. I'm very pleased to speak on this Maritime Powers Extension Bill in its second reading. In many ways we'll be echoing, as is the nature of this House, what the Minister had said, but by and large there is concord, there's agreement across the parties for the necessity of this bill, and I'll touch on some of that. I wear two hats, but I only mention that because I'll recuse myself from one of them, is that obviously the chair of the committee, but I'm also the National Party spokesperson for Customs, but it's not my role, Mr Speaker, to put that hat on while addressing the topic today, other than to say we're very supportive of the intentions of the bill. And that's been part of the reason why not only as a committee but this side of the House was happy to expedite the bill as quickly as possible through the select committee process. And I'll talk to that in a moment too. So the committee did thoroughly consider the bill, but as I was saying, we did move relatively swiftly. And that was for several reasons. One is we had 3 submissions in total. And I'd like to put on the record my thanks to those 3 submitters, organisations and individuals for their time. That, of course, reduces, if you will, Mr Speaker, the workload to the committee in terms of consideration. The second is that, as we had noted, there was great cooperation and agreement on the committee around not only the need for this bill, but actually how it was drafted. And the committee worked very quickly to bring it back to the House. It's no surprise that one of the reasons is that we want this set of powers to be made available to our customs people as quickly as possible. The third reason I think we were able to expedite the process quickly, again without cutting any corners, was our excellent advisors, and can I acknowledge those from Customs and from MFAT for their work and advice. It was very much appreciated, not only the clarity of their thinking, but in fact the good humour at times that was illustrated, and I think probably their patience, perhaps only with the chair, but maybe with the entire committee, as various questions were asked. But my thanks on my behalf and that of the committee to them, and not to forget PCO as well. Obviously the drafting of the bill has only seen, as the commentary indicates, very minor changes. Look, the bill is relatively simple. I've spoken in the first reading around what the whole purpose is. Fundamentally, it's about New Zealand's good citizenry, how to be a good citizen in the world. We have signed up to several agreements. One is the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, as it's often referred to. As a signatory of that, we cooperate to stop the illicit smuggling of drugs. I won't get into the different types of drugs, obviously, but you know it's pretty connotative what we're suggesting there. We've also signed up to a convention. It's known as the Illicit Traffic in Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances. So very much like UNCLOS in a way, it's directed at stopping the illicit, movement of drugs around the world. So we've signed up for that, but like so many international treaties that we sign or engage with, we need domestic legislation to make those active in New Zealand. And it's been a little bit of a gap in our customs framework to date that we have not been able to, it has been felt, to fully execute those treaties. So to put it very simply, until this bill passes, and this is not an encouragement to those considering smuggling drugs in New Zealand, but wondering whether I'm perjuring the good nature of the House. Yeah, I've caught myself in a trap, Mr Hughes, oh well. But basically, at the moment, there's some ambiguity of whether or not we'd be able to prosecute people who are internationally smuggling drugs. So I'm not talking about people bringing drugs into New Zealand. Our customs people do a remarkable job in that space, along with other inappropriate publications and so forth. But if at the moment, That's a good point. One of my colleagues has pointed out that he doesn't think that the drug smugglers are watching television. Well, I hope they're not. Maybe a smuggled television, who knows? Yeah, it would be. And the Justice Minister said we'll have to have a talk after this. That's right, that's right. They must be very interested in Greek and Latin as well, I suspect. Look, fundamentally, he's thrown me. There we go. Fundamentally at the moment, Mr. Speaker, this is almost one of the first times in 7 years and one of the simplest... Anyway, at the moment, if we interdict or stop a ship on the high seas, which we are empowered to do, there is some question of whether or not we'd be able to bring a prosecution within the New Zealand environment. So I think it's a really important element for the House to understand that we do have as the powers to do that at the moment under UNCLOS and other agreements. We can stop ships which we are suspicious of, both those flagged to other sovereign nations and those which are not flagged. There are protocols in place to do that. But there is, again, ambiguity that if we had stopped a vessel, let's say, off Fiji, it is found to contain a large number of drugs, we'd obviously interdict that ship, take the crew into custody, do all the requirements that you would imagine with Foreign Affairs and our other partners. But there's, again, a question without this law whether we'd be able to actually make the necessary prosecution. So this is what the bill seeks to tighten up. New Zealand is well advanced in its customs work, engaging with customs, and thank the customs people for their opportunity to have come and visited their sites to get a slightly deeper understanding of what they do. Our work there, or their work, is very thorough. They're doing an excellent job, but as is probably no surprise, Mr. Speaker, New Zealand continues to come under pressure, particularly as more and more people look to bring drugs in. It's a lucrative market in New Zealand. It's not obviously a large one, but people, for whatever reason, are quite prepared to pay a high amount of money. Not sure if that's a pun, but a high amount of money. Yeah, I'm very sorry, it's a Thursday evening. A high amount of money that obviously helps generate the trade, and we know that a lot of that is coming through the Pacific. It's coming through the Pacific Islands. And so fundamentally, that's the area that we need more work in. And I'm pleased to see that Customs is focusing on that. It was mentioned by the Minister, and quite importantly, that work by Customs is not done alone. They cooperate very closely with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and as I had noted, they are one of our advisors on this bill. Obviously, Customs is not going to operate in international waters or in the protected areas of other countries, such as the Cook Islands, without engaging with that nation. They work very closely with the Ministry of Primary Industries as well. They have a hand to play. And importantly too, with our Ministry of Defence, and just with the Minister and the House to acknowledge through him the great work that Defence does in supporting Customs. Obviously, Customs itself does not have vessels to send into the Pacific. They tap effectively. Defence cooperate very closely together, along with, I believe, our allies such as Australia, to do these missions, to interdict the various vessels. And I think that's important because not only is that a service to New Zealand, but it's a service to, well, the wider realms within New Zealand, or wider countries within the realm, but also to our partners in the Pacific. So I mentioned Australia. We've obviously got the likes of Fiji and Tonga and Samoa, the Cook Islands, to name but a few. So we have a very large area to police. And I think now, when this bill obviously moves through second reading, and finally and through into its third after the Committee of the Whole House, it will just strengthen even further the good work that is being done there. So, Mr. Speaker, very pleased that we had the opportunity on the committee to consider this bill. As I've been keen to stress, we were thorough in our work. We didn't want to cut any corners, but we also wanted to move this through as a process as quickly as possible, and that was aided by some excellent, albeit three submissions advisors who gave us very clear thoughts and advice, as you might expect. The work too of the committee, I found myself as chair that the questions were useful, insightful. I think it did help members bring their ideas together, and ultimately we've been able to report back the bill very simply, really I could almost name the changes. I won't, but count them on one hand. But I do just want to finish in some ways where I should have started, and that's acknowledging the men and women who do work for our Customs Service, those who work through Defence and MPI and MFAT, who continue to keep our borders safe. It's a service that is greatly appreciated, and hopefully this is just one more, bit in the arsenal to help.
Speaker.
I call Jamie Strange.